Welcome to the Right Click Save podcast. We are your hosts, Calcio and Jimmy T. On the show today, we have Carly Reilly, the host of the hugely popular Overpriced JPEG podcast.
It was an absolute pleasure to jump on with Carly today. It was nice to have a kind of refreshing chat about the market and how it's kind of going at the moment. But don't forget to, if you haven't already, like and subscribe to the Right Click Save podcast. We're ever closer to 10,000 subs. We'd love you to join us on a longer part of the journey.
GM, Carly, we've been wanting to get you on the podcast for a long time, so it's really great to have you on here.
GM, I've been wanting to come on for a while, so I'm glad we finally made it happen.
And it's awesome to see you as your World of Women Galaxy NFT that you own.
Yeah, this is fun. I don't even have my profile picture on Twitter, for example, as an NFT, and I never have. That's been kind of like a bold decision for me being in this space. So it's fun to get to be represented for once as a digital identity here.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I was going to ask you about that later. Have you ever had any plans to change your online identity to an NFT?
I probably will. I'm playing coy. It's got to be the right moment. Maybe a project that I'm really deeply involved with, or I'm biding my time so that it's really special when I finally do it. Though I have to say, part of it for me is it's kind of a cliche to be a bridge between Web 2 and Web 3. And by no means do I think I'm some fancy bridge between Web 2 and Web 3. But I do feel like it's kind of nice to be able to represent somebody who's completely in this space, loves this space, but can still kind of be myself or kind of be a normie, on Twitter or on social media. So some of my friends are looking at it being oh, okay, you don't have to kind of lose your old identity in order to go into this world. I feel like it's kind of nice for people to see that.
That's kind of a good point, actually, because I think almost people feel like to be in Web3 that they have to have some kind of digital identity, which isn't necessarily themselves. Yeah. So it's interesting to think that the people aren't doing that aren't being themselves because they're in Web3. Yeah.
I don't know. And there's such an impression, there can be such a negative impression of this space, of course, as we all know. And these weird people and their damn ape pictures and what the heck. And it's no, you can also love this all and just keep your professional headshot up there and still be a total degen.
Do you think that your background is why you've decided to stay as yourself? Do you think it's predominantly where you've come from before, and so it's kind of natural to stay as Carly as opposed to becoming an ape or whatever else?
Partly, I think I am to my core a contrarian. I think a lot of people in this space are, but I think then even in this space, I have to find the places where I can be a contrarian. I didn't get my ears pierced till I was 18 because all the girls I knew in my school had their ears pierced. And I was no, fine, then I'm not going to. I'll latch onto these kind of strange ways to rebel, rebel with a very lowercase r. And I kind of think it's partly that. But yeah, I worked in politics and I had a tiny little bit of a following coming from the Yang world. And, so I think there's an advantage to kind of keeping that identity alive, probably. So it probably isn't unrelated to it.
That segues us quite nicely, actually, because one of the questions I was going to ask you was about your genesis story into Web3, into NFTs. Do you think that rebellious nature is one of the main key drivers why you became interested in the space?
Yeah, 100%. I think I've always I don't know. I almost want to say intellectual tomboy, but I hate that because it does imply a gender thing, which I don't mean, but definitely just kind of always gravitated towards ideas. Again, this can also go to dark places, which is very much not what I mean, but just kind of gravitated towards some fringiness. And so I worked at a hedge fund out of college, and there was the one guy in the office who was into crypto. And so I was all right, tell me about this thing. You know what I mean? Tell me about crypto. And that was in 2016, 2017. So that was my first kind of dabbling in it and owned a little bit of stuff and sold it all really early. So never really did anything crazy. And then, did that answer the question?
Yeah, kind of. That's how you got into Web3. What was it about? Obviously, Overpriced JPEGs is predominantly about the NFT side of the space. Yeah. What was it about NFTs that kind of stood out for you in the Web3 kind of ecosystem?
Yeah, I think so. So when I was learning about crypto and learning about Ethereum back in 2016, 2017. And it was, the thing that was kind of caught my attention was this concept of smart contracts and the idea that legal contracts would someday be like automated code, essentially. Like that was sort of how it was being painted to me. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And finance and banks, like it was all kind of on the finance side. And I was at a hedge fund, so perhaps that's not all that, surprising. And then, so in the beginning of last year, I guess, right, beginning of 2021, probably February, March, I kind of keyed into what was going on in DeFi. So that was actually initially what drew me back in. Was I was like, oh shit, like all this stuff that was still pretty conceptual, or still entirely conceptual essentially in 2016, 2017 when it was being told to me, they've actually started to do some of this and really build some of this. So that got me interested. But at my core, I'm not really a finance person, which is funny because I have historically kind of done that professionally, but I always had like some sort of creative pursuit on the side. And as much as I say like I'm a contrarian, like I love Taylor Swift. Like there's also a ton of ways in which I'm very much a normie and very much like super mainstream. And so I think like I love celebrity gossip stuff. And so when I found NFTs, it almost felt like that perfect marriage, right? Where it was this blockchain tech kind of emerging technology fringe stuff that I have always kind of liked and been drawn to. But there was also this, what I could see like a mainstream cultural component to it, or at least a cultural component to it, period. And that is just inherently more interesting to me than like yield farming or, spending a bunch of time trying to figure out, okay, like what, how can I get a loan off of this and then leverage it for the high interest here before the thing rugs and collapses and, whatever. So, so then I was just, then it was just the perfect blend and I was off to the races.
I think that's a really good point, actually, because I think I was really into crypto and Web3. I thought I was late. It was like 2017, so I thought I was really late to the party.
So funny.
But apparently not. Apparently it wasn't the case. But at the time, it's like I was really into it. I was listening to every podcast. I was reading everything you can. But there's not much of an outlet you can have apart from, going onto Twitter and kind of trying to get into conversation about it. None of your friends and family want to know. What I found with NFTs is it gave a lot of people that outlet that they didn't have in the normal kind of crypto sphere, where there was a lot more to talk about, communities to get involved with. This is why everyone's screaming utility all the time, because they want something else to be able to get involved with and continue the conversation about crypto. So I think that's a really good point that you made. I think it is that outlet that people have now got in the kind of Web3 space.
I actually think Snowfro was quoting somebody else when he said this, but I interviewed him at a conference at one point and he was just talking about NFTs as like crypto had finally found its product market fit, you actually had kind of a crypto product and there was clearly a market and, that he was really talking about crypto art, obviously, and art blocks, but like, and art being the kind of first in what I hope and think will be a wave of other products that kind of come on the scene, but totally.
What drew me in was I'm a collectibles dealer. That's what I do for a living and have done for years. So the idea of being able to take IP and use it in a more exciting way with technology that benefits everyone was super interesting to me. And I think it's quite nice that you've got that level of interest as well. There is like music and exactly, so you are a collector to an aspect. How do you feel about the space now that you've been involved again for well over a year, compared to when you first jumped into it? Is it the same as you would have expected it to be, or is it a completely different journey that you've been on?
I don't know if you had asked me in, May of last year, what I expected of all of this a year and a half later. I mean, of course, everything moved so much faster than I think anybody could have anticipated. But I also was early, because I think it's true when we say we're all early, like we are still very early in this journey. But I'm still in like the most recent class, to join NFTs, right? Like I'm still in like the like mine is the freshman class kind of. So I rode the bull market. Like I wasn't early to the bull market in the sense I didn't come in December of 2020 or November, January, like I really kind of came in with this new wave. So I've just sort of been along for the ride, drinking from the fire hose. I think what I'm loving about this bear market, and maybe what I wouldn't say wouldn't have expected, but what I'm noticing is, of course, so I just rode this bull wave and was like, oh my God, I cannot keep up with all of these projects and there's new volume surging on OpenSea and what do you know, I missed another opportunity to make $1 million freaking dollars. Like, maybe I'm not cut out for this, whatever, right? Like kind of rode that journey. And then And then everyone's like, oh, bear markets are for building. And I'm sure there's lots of building happening. There's lots of building happening and there's lots happening behind the scenes. But even the conversations feel more substantive. Like we're having this royalties conversation, which like, thank God we're having this now because like we really needed to be talking about the fact that, well, like they're not really, royalties aren't enforceable at the smart contract level. And like, let's figure out how we're going to address that as a community sooner rather than later and figure out how to make it a part of the culturally normal fabric if we can't enforce them on the smart contract level. And I think substantive conversations that are like building that are happening. So I really enjoy that.
That's good. I think you're right about us being early, and it feels weird because, as you said, you felt late when you came in. You felt like you'd missed the window already on NFTs. And I think, as I was saying about joining crypto in 2017, I think in 2025 we're going to be looking back going, "Wow, we were early."
Yeah.
But I was listening to another podcast recently, and they were talking about the fact that maybe it isn't necessarily a good thing to be this early, and that's why a lot of these issues that are coming up around royalties, around IP, around copyright, like. These problems have not been solved, and we are having to bear the brunt of it as the people that are early to the market. So there's these pros and cons of being early that, yeah, there's this huge opportunity to make money, to be a pathfinder, a pioneer of the industry, but then you do have to deal with all the flack of a seriously immature market.
Totally. I mean, we could go down that copyright rabbit hole. That's something that I'm super interested in. And I've been having some serious conversations with like IP lawyers to really wrap my head around. It's a topic area I gravitate towards, but I totally agree. I think like it's not revelatory to say, but like you should be in this because you are just fascinated by the tech and the culture and being on the frontier of something, not because you want to speculate your way into a lot of money because it's too early to know what's going to happen. And something that I used to say on my podcast, or I guess I still kind of say quite a bit, is like, or I had said, is being early doesn't necessarily mean the prices are low. Like, I feel like there was always this conflation of like, we're so early, so like if you buy in now, it doesn't matter what price you're getting it at because it's definitely gonna be higher later. And it's like, no. We're early in that, like the tech is super primitive and the UX is super bad. And there's gonna be all these use cases that we're really not properly fathoming at this moment. That's the ways in which we're early. Not that like the prices are going to go up another 100x from here necessarily. That's an important distinction.
It's a shame that that's not the case.
Yeah, I know. Well, hey, some projects probably will, right? Like there will definitely obviously be opportunities, but I just,
that would be the mass onboarding event we're looking for. Don't worry, everyone, you're all going to make money. WAGME is real.
Yeah, guaranteed. Yeah.
For me, I think it's just like greater fool syndrome seems to have played out massively with NFTs, where it is literally just passing on essentially a lot of things which do absolutely nothing, and the greater fool picks it up. I'd be interested to see where we are with those projects and which ones in 10 years time we do look back on and go, actually that has lasted the test of time. You mentioned a minute ago about royalties and about how it is not relevant to smart contract. Obviously we've just had the X2Y2 tweet recently, literally today. It's essentially that they said that royalties should not be definitive and that they want to give flexibility to you as the buyer as to how much royalty you pay. So you have a lot more decision and prudence on what happens with the product you're buying. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So, okay. So I'll go broad, which is I think I'm not alone in that. Something that drew me to this whole concept was royalties. Was like, oh, this makes so much sense, and the innovation here is this concept of artist royalties, which we've never had before for physical paintings, and it really excites me in the context of, for example, concert tickets and et cetera, et cetera. So I tend to very much be of the mind that creators should be able to set royalties, and that fine, if you don't want to pay that royalty, you don't want to play on that artist, that creator's terms, then you don't have to engage with it, but that the artist should be able to set that up and the creator should be able to manage that. So from that standpoint, I would probably say that I disagree with X2Y2. With that being said, like I am almost to a fault, like usually able to see many sides of an argument. So if I dove deeper, I could be like, okay, I understand what X2Y2 is trying to get at. I wish royalties were enforceable at a smart contract level, such that a creator could set it up and they could do it and whatever. Given that that's not true, okay, so we have to deal with the world as it is. That means that maybe, you're going to have some marketplaces that will say, okay, we don't want to enforce this. For me, I actually do think it's going to be like the answer to this is going to be on the buyer side. And that's why the nuance that I'm maybe picking up from X2Y2, though again, I'd have to dig into it, is like about the buyer specifically, is like the seller who's presumably exiting a project is obviously going to have an incentive to be able to sell it however they can and to not pay any creator royalties, any marketplace royalties, et cetera, et cetera. The buyer, presumably, who's entering a project wants that project to succeed, and therefore is the one who probably has more incentive to have the royalties get paid. So I'm hoping that this is something that can kind of be solved through buyer incentives, and then just by making it inconvenient for people to not pay these royalties. And you know, there's a number of different ways that could potentially happen. I feel like I keep hearing ideas about, like, you could have a list of marketplaces that accept royalties, and you could create a smart contract that like reviews that list, and then you can't list on it if it's a marketplace that doesn't accept royalties. I mean, that sounds kind of nightmarish to me. Like, I wish there was a simpler way, and I'm still hoping that somebody will tell me there is a way that a smart contract could just like check marketplace code, and there's some sort of like code standardization where they can check and say, okay, this code will clearly, you know, honor a royalty, and therefore we'll hook onto it, rather than having to have like some centralized list somewhere. But I do think things along those lines will make it so that it does become increasingly inconvenient to not use, to not pay the artist royalties.
There's just so many facets to this conversation at the moment, and so many different ways that we can go. I think what I loved about crypto and smart contracts was the idea that they were trustless, that you could rely on the technology to facilitate these things. And it is really demoralizing that this has come out the fact that, obviously, I mean, it's always been the case, but the smart contract royalties aren't enforceable, which now comes back to a trust issue. Is when someone's buying it, are they going to do it in a trustful way where the creator still receives the royalties? There's so many different ways that we can end up going with this. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's a development that basically takes these NFTs off marketplaces, and they have their own marketplaces, and they like break the transfer part of the normal smart contract for an NFT, so that the only way to transfer them is through a marketplace, and therefore that they gain the royalties. Or it could go completely the other way, and the market could say, you know what, we're going to treat this like tipping in the US, that it's not mandatory, but it's kind of mandatory.
Totally. I saw that tipping analogy. It was who did it? Punk 6529, I think, made the tipping analogy, or that's who I saw make it. And so many punks. Yeah, you just came up with that, Jimmy. You're in good company. And I agree. I thought that was a good analogy of like, it's just culturally normative. Like, I would never consider not tipping, and frankly, like, never consider not tipping well. Like, I just am so committed to that. I think it's going to be a hard thing to pull off here, because in a restaurant, I got the waitress or waiter like looking at me, bringing me my food. Like, it's like I'm you inherently cannot be anonymous by definition of what it is to be at a restaurant. You know, and or if I'm, and here we're like anonymous, and it's just easy to kind of have the worst behavior come out when you're online. And I think it's one thing when we're still this small insular community who can really like have a community set of values, but when this technology goes wide and goes broad, like the early internet folks had a community and a culture, but it's not like the internet now, like, you know, the internet is everything to everyone now. It can be, or anything to anyone. So I think it's gonna be really hard to continue to instill, like, just like on a cultural normative level to uphold it for forever. But I think the point you're making about the different ways marketplaces might play out is an interesting place where this might get solved. Again, it can't get solved fully, because there's always going to be people who could like go, you know, talk on a Discord somewhere and make a transaction. Like, there's always side edge cases. It's a matter of making it inconvenient enough that the majority of people are abiding by it. And I do think like specific marketplaces like that have cachet for X, Y, or Z reasons, like GameStop is setting up a marketplace on Immutable X, and GameStop is trying to port the model that they've had in the Web 2 world, which is, oh my gosh, like this game is releasing, and if you come and line up, and you'll, you know, like this, and creating this whole cultural moment around the release of a game, and if you're a rewards member, you get extra points or discounts or whatever, and move that into Web 3, which I think is really interesting. And so if GameStop is able to create enough brand equity, experience points, et cetera, rewards points that make it worthwhile that you want to transact on the GameStop marketplace, which I think is very possible, like, then you'll be abiding by royalties. I think, you know, Disney will go do the same thing. I've had this guy John Rogers on the podcast before who's talked about like Disney should come and fork ZK Sync and just have their own kind of fork of like a layer 2 that's like the Disney ecosystem. Disney layer 2 is where all the transactions are happening there. And I think it'll be more that way, where to that point of like these marketplaces will evolve in such a way that they it's worth transacting on them, even though royalties are being honored, and it just becomes really inconvenient to transact other places that are like fringe and not doing it.
It feels like we're going to pull in Web 2 centralization to fix a problem in the decentralized space.
Yeah, I mean, you know, life is a balance, right? So extremes on either end tend to fall apart.
We suddenly realize that letting everyone do what they want to do has negative consequences.
Well, to your point, it's the trustless thing. When it's trustless, decentralization works. When trust is required, you need some level of centralization, because you need to be able to trust a brand, or like you can't, you need that. So, I mean, there's
been a lot of controversy about this X2Y2 thing, but in theory, what they're saying is, hey, we're offering you an honesty box kind of solution to this. People pay what you think you should pay. But unfortunately, I think the furore that's come up against it, because everyone's like, well, most people are just not going to do that.
Yeah,
which is a lack of faith.
And it just feels icky. And this is where like I try to be a realist of like, just because something feels icky, like be rational. Like there's all sorts of examples of people feeling like things are icky and it's kind of irrational things. But like it's like, why are you trying to screw creators? Like, you know what I mean? It just has this icky feel of like, it's like, if the creator wants to sell their work and this is what they would like to be recurringly paid for it, like opt into the parameters they're setting, or just opt the fuck out. But again, because you can't actually force that, that's where I become nuanced about it. I'm like, okay, well, we can't force that. Humans are humans. But I do find it really distasteful at the platform level, these platforms kind of coming out and being like, yeah, whatever, like screw what the creator wants. I'm like, oh. Yeah.
It seems to be a bit of a theme at the moment. I think combine that with the kind of free mint meta that we've been sitting in for a few months now. It does feel like we're at a big race to zero at the moment.
That's interesting. I agree. I think.
Are we going to have to change your podcast name to Underpriced JPEGs?
That's like my best performing tweet of all time was me being like considering a rebrand to Underpriced JPEGs.
I've literally got no originality today.
No, it's impressive. Again, it was like my best performing tweet. You're in the company of Punk 6529. You're like all your references are great.
Like and subscribe.
So I'm thinking about this race to zero question that you have. I mean, first of all, I think it's healthy, right? Because I think there was way too much value being extracted from the space without enough being delivered. So what I like about the free mint meta is, in theory, and now it doesn't always work this way in practice, because when these things get hyped, then everybody else who buys it, there's a ton of activity before a project's necessarily quote unquote proven anything. But it was really unhealthy, the place we had gotten to of like, give me a bunch of money up front and then maybe I'll go doing this thing. Like, do you know what I mean? What? Yeah. Like I'm anonymous and you can't know anything about who I actually am, but like, give me this money. Like that was weird. So the free mint thing, like before it became popular, when I've thought about doing an NFT project myself, I was like, I would do a free mint if I did it, because I just, and this goes back to the being early thing, and it's not always a good thing to be early. Like one of the big reasons I didn't launch an NFT project or as part of the podcast or anything, and I'd be curious how you guys have thought about this, but it is like I was like, I feel like we don't have the answers yet. You know what I mean? It's too experimental, and I just don't feel ready to handle that kind of responsibility. Like I want to wait until I have a little bit more data about where all this is settling before I kind of go and go that route. But I was, for that same reason, I was like, if I was going to do one, I'd want it to be a free mint. I do think, though, that this thing hits the mainstream when it's no longer about, making a ton of money, or it's no longer about like expecting that you're going to make a bunch of money. And a lot of and that we will land at a place where a lot of NFTs are free, right? It's like, or it's a receipt. It's you go to your you have a particular coffee shop you love and your receipt is an NFT. And now Gigi Hadid has her public wallet where she shows the coffee shop where she gets her like coffee every morning. And that, like it's going to be that kind of thing where I think free NFTs will actually be a huge part of this all being mainstream and normalized and whatever. And so, or you're paying for the NFL Super Bowl ticket and you're getting an NFT, so you're paying for it from that standpoint. You're not really paying for the NFT in that case. You're paying for the NFL game. And so like we keep talking about how are we going to like put utility on these things, and I'm like, let's just look where there already is utility, like concerts and like tickets, like what people already want to do, and then just, you know, give an NFT as part of it, because it's a you know, cooler way to handle collectibles than some like shitty paper ticket that you have to like keep in a glass case, you know, forever, or else it's gonna whatever. So
I definitely agree with you. I think we have discussed, I think everyone in the space has discussed at some point, should I drop a project? I think it's just a natural conversation. If you're inquisitive, if you're working on a product, whatever it is. For us, it was pretty similar. It was that if we do something, this is a month, 6 months, 8 months into our journey in NFTs. And do we have enough research? Do we have enough knowledge, enough acumen to be able to do something properly? Is it just about making a shitload of money? Well, the answer is no. We want to create a proper product. Do we have enough to be able to do that yet? Probably not. And then you look at market condition. Right now, and for however many months, it's been pretty shit. So as a consequence, if you put something out now, or a month ago, 3 months ago, is that going to get the optimal that you deserve? Are you going to be able to put out something that's quality that you really want to continue working on? And that's why we've really enjoyed doing the podcast, I think, because it's allowed us to keep talking to people, a bit like what you said earlier, where you have a proper conversation with someone, you learn something, and you feel like a bit restored, a bit more regenerative about it. In regards to tickets, I 100% agree with you. I've just paid 70 quid, again, not the end of the world, because there's no postal service in the UK at the minute, just because I can't get tickets for a football game down. That's just for postage. Whereas if that's an NFT, I press 2 buttons and it comes over to me. So I do fully agree with you that we're missing simplicity and utility, and there's really easy things that would make a lot more sense than trying to make a monkey or a various animal super useful. So I'm keen to see what you think is in the market at the minute. I know, again, you mentioned earlier that you're not scrupulously studying OpenSea. I'd be keen to see what you think is working really well for a product, or if there are any projects that you're keeping up with quite closely or more closely than others, perhaps.
Well, one thing, this is not like, again, what you're going to find in the OpenSea top rankings, but there was something this morning, and I have to, it's again on in my thread of things that I want to dive deeper into, but it just caught my attention. I think DraftKings just came out with some way that they're integrating NFTs into their, like, you know, kind of classic product of like fantasy football, you know, trading, earn money, et cetera, and like things like that. Again, I don't have all the details, but I kind of got the high level and was like, this strikes me as a really like cool use case for having NFTs that, I don't know, maybe people balk at, but like, I don't think so. And Matt Kalish, who founded DraftKings or is the CEO of DraftKings, I don't know. Matt Kalish is in some way very seniorly involved in DraftKings, and he's good friends with like Gary Vaynerchuk, and does like a podcast with him. So he clearly like gets it and gets this space, and you know, has been playing in it. So it's not entirely surprising to me that they're doing things well. I mean, speaking of which, I mean, Gary V, you know, I think he's kind of easy to like, you know, like he was sort of like, you know, celebrity who came into the space, so to speak, but I think he's done just a fantastic job. I think he's executed at a really high level, and I think he has a really clearly articulated vision of what he's looking to do, which is these are collectibles, and he's looking to create the next Disney. And he's looking to create like super hyper relevant entertainment IP, and you will then own the collectible version of that. And I think, you know, you can make your own decision about whether or not that will play out, but he's clearly doing things to execute on that vision, and I can understand that vision. I think the problem we get into sometimes in this space is a lot of hand waving, you know, where we're like, we're going to be this or we're going to be that. Doodles has been quiet for a little while, but I tend to think they execute at an incredibly high level. And again, a vision that I can understand. Like, okay, you're trying to be IP. You're not dissimilar from Gary, though maybe Disney isn't the perfect comp, but like you're going to create entertainment. It's going to be family friendly based on your brand and your look. And this is sort of like a collectible entry point into this ecosystem that I could totally see Doodles if they wanted to go to Disney route, like in a Disneyland, like at their Doodle Land, and they have created. So I think they tend to execute very well. Again, I guess all these projects have been kind of falling lately, but they got real cheap. They were in like in the sixes recently.
Fives.
I think.
They went as low as high fives, I think.
But again, I just think that's the short-sightedness of this space. I'm like, if they're quiet, they're building. Like, these people aren't like off yachting in Saint Tropez. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, what do you think they're fucking doing?
It's like, I think some of the problems one of the problems with Doodles have had is they're really quiet on the social media. So they haven't put a post out on their main account for nearly a month now.
The only tweet they've had in the last month was a reply to me when I tweeted out our 5 minutes or less video on Doodles, and that was it. And that got more replies on the actual tweet from Doodles. It had about 50, 60 replies from people saying, oh, you are alive. And I get it, I understand, but at the same time, if you've invested, let's say, 15 grand on a Doodle, it baffles me still that people don't have the patience to just not be stressed about whether they tweet. I don't know, it's weird. It's 100% what you said, short-sightedness. It's weird.
I know, so, because my reaction to that, to be honest, is like, I don't care. Like, what? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, they just hired the former CEO of like Billboard. Like, again, clearly this is not like, you know, whatever. But like, clearly these are serious people. Now, on the other hand, you have a bunch of money. Like, why don't you just have somebody to tweet?
Sure.
Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I guess I kind of understand that too. I'm like, if it's about community, like engage with the community. So again, I can see both sides. Like, I could make the argument both ways. But for me personally, like, I think that team is savvy as hell. And it feels like it's been like I don't know. It doesn't feel like it's been that many months. When was NFT NYC?
June.
Okay, so it's been 2 months. But like, you know, I think about everything that was the duplicator and Julian Hogwin's like big, like, you know, presentation there that went over really well. I'm like, we're 2 months out from like stellar press, and it's dropped by like 10 ETH, and you're like, what has fundamentally changed about this project to you? Like, you know, it's so when you ask about like what I kind of am tracking, I mean, look, it's not it's nothing shocking, right? The blue chips are obviously the things that are kind of holding up the best during this era, which is not surprising. So I'm very much tracking Bored Apes. I've kind of had to eat my tongue. Is that the word? Or eat my bite my tongue. Yeah, but that's not what I'm trying to say either. Eat my words. I think
part of the process.
But biting is just a step before eating, you know? I guess eat my words is what I was trying to say when it comes to Yuga, because I've always sort of done the thing where I'm like, I think the Doodles team is super talented. And by the way, I own neither of these projects. I mean, like, Doodles, so I have like no vested interest here. Doodles is super talented. I think they execute really well. And I was like, I think Yuga has sort of lucked into their success more than they've like, you know, and I'm like, I'm wrong. Like, I eat those words. I was incorrect. Like, I think Yuga is actually incredibly talented. And I interviewed Herman Narula, who's the CEO of Improbable, which is like the tech backside of the other side metaverse. Like, holy hell, he's so smart. And that was such a good partnership choice, at least from what we can tell up to this point. And he spoke so highly of that team. I was like, they're so creative. They're like a dream partner to us. And now just, you know, more information that I'm getting, I'm like, oh, wow, Yuga is really talented and building something really interesting here. So
what do you think they do well? What do you think, if we look at the like clear outliers in the blue chip market, what do you think that they do better than everyone else?
Higher.
Yeah.
Like, I actually think they, and you know, that's where the luck piece comes in, right? Which is like, they had enough kind of momentum to be big enough that they could, but like, they've clearly made really intelligent hires. Like, you know, you have Wiley and Gordon. Wait, Wiley is Gordon Goner. Yeah. Gargamel, Wiley, whatever. Like the two guys, I feel like, who are kind of, you know, they're definitely super, and they're creative. I think they're super creative. You know, I think higher in creativity. Like, when I think about, because I'm diving into all this IP stuff now, and I again came of age in this space a year ago, where I didn't know. I was just drinking from the fire hose. So when Bored Apes did the like giving the IP rights to holders, I was just like, okay, like that's okay, cool, interesting, you know. And I almost feel like I'm only really now realizing, like, holy hell, like that's
mental.
Yeah, really innovative, because nobody in Web 2 ever did that. Like, brands in Web 2 weren't doing that. And we just take for granted now that that's what Web 3 does. But like, they did that. Like, what a wild kind of, I don't know. I'm really having an appreciation for the momentousness in some ways of that decision in a way that I didn't have even at the time. And so I think they're really creative, and I think they hire really well.
It's definitely a balance for me with IP, because again, I've made my entire career off of selling other people's IP legally, of course, because I sell collectibles. But the whole goal of it is to identify which pieces of intellectual property people love, identify which characters resonate with people the most, buy those products and sell those to the people that love them. I think with giving IP away, what you do is create a really weird juxtaposition where if people use it properly, it's amazing. But I don't really know, if I'm honest. Again, we've got good examples of people using their IP well. We had, was it the Borden? What was the restaurant
Bored and Dangerous?
Oh, wait. Yeah. There was the restaurant as well.
Hungry.
That's it.
Oh, Bored and Hungry. Bored and Dangerous is the Jenkins the Valet
project.
Different
Kettle of Fish. Amazing, right? So there's a few. Do you think that people just really are not ready for that level of IP though? Do you think there are enough people who are going to be savvy enough, creative enough, have the finances just to really use IP and use some money? Do we think we've got enough of those people actively in the space right now to really make that matter?
Is this sort of a question around like the different like CC0 versus like, you know, like,
yeah, I want to get
hybrid.
To that, yeah.
So also, I started talking about Jenk and the Valet, and you were asking me like what projects I'm following. I had Blake Finnecune on Finnecune.
Oh, nice.
I always fuck up
That's
her
a good
name,
episode.
and she's so smart. She was really kind of
really
telling me like 10K TF, and so like that. Those are some projects that I'm trying to track, but they have so much going on. It's hard to track them. I feel like ever. But so like in terms of bear market tracking. Okay, so gosh, what I have really come to appreciate and understand is that I absolutely do not think the next Marvel comes out of a CC0 project. I will say that straight up. So when it comes to like Calcio, like what you have done, right, in terms of the IP that's on the back of your wall, like I don't think you're getting that kind of thing from a CC0 project or potentially even a hybrid project, though I don't feel strongly about that. Sure. But that to me is separate from whether like the tokens, so let's take Moonbirds, obviously the CC0 example recently, like those tokens I think could still have a lot of value, because I don't think you're going to get Star Wars out of Moonbirds, but that's obviously clearly not what Moonbirds is even going for, so I think it's fine. I don't think you're getting Star Wars out of Blit Maps. I don't think you're getting Star Wars out of Cryptodes. I don't think you're getting, I go through like the big CC0 projects, you're not getting Star Wars out of them. You might get Star Wars, I use that loosely, but like right out of VFriends. Right? Like, because you've got a creative visionary there who is driving for that. What I've really come around to is, okay, but that doesn't mean you couldn't create some really important IP in its own way with Moonbirds, where that symbol, that logo is memed into such cultural relevance, and the access and utility that you're getting with it is separate, like makes that visual and that token and that collectible worth something. It's just different than the reasons that I think collectibles have ever been worth something historically, which has been more about like creating a film that's incredible or something. So that's where I would land.
It's such an interesting conversation, and I think that the popularity of Bored Apes really brought IP into the spotlight in the NFT space, and without them this conversation almost wouldn't be happening, because they did that groundbreaking decision of giving the IP rights to all of their holders, and the holders therefore immediately were like, this is really valuable, especially the Bored Ape price was flying up. This is a really valuable thing, and that's what drove the price of Bored Apes. But then on the contrary, you look at something like VFriends, which again, really popular. I think Gary Vee's great. I think he's doing a really awesome job. But what he's basically doing is selling a product and then saying, I will make this IP valuable. Whereas Bored Apes is more like, you guys have kind of got to make it valuable at the same time. And CC0 is, you guys have got to blow up the brand so far beyond all recognition that everyone wants to own one. But then there's such a contradiction with the conversation on what's the value of ownership in the NFT space. And it's where these things come together, where the conversations happen. There's so many grey areas and different opinions on what is valuable.
Well, I had these IP lawyers on the show the other day, and one of them was talking about the different layers within IP, and that in Web 2 world you have, gosh, I'm not going to get this perfectly right. Like you could have the painting and then the sets of rights associated with the painting. And those are actually two different layers of a stack, right? And then what NFTs introduce is that plus the kind of token layer. And so this is where I think it's a kind of a new paradigm. It's a paradigm shift. It's new, right? Because if memes are popular, if this is popular, like that Moonbird token, maybe more so than that character or whatever, like could become worth more value. I'm not articulating this well because it is like this weird, it's like, it's so, but it's different. Like the tokens themselves are sort of, it's this new bet we're all making. So
yeah,
I'll be really interested to see how it plays out.
Yeah, absolutely. As I say, there's just so many different facets to it. IP is such an interesting conversation in the space at the moment. And again, I think it comes down to the fact that the valuations in the NFT market are so crazy that people are trying to drive value into them. People asking, why is that picture of your VFriend. Which VFriends is it that you own, Carly?
Oh my gosh, they're I laugh because one of them is so ugly. I love Gary. I love VFriends, but holy hell. I have a sufficient shrimp. It is I think like people make fun of the Gary's art in general. That has got to be the ugliest one. There is like nothing. It's just like it's just a shape, essentially.
You just need to print it out, put it on your fridge. That's
I
the
know.
best way to live.
Yeah, and then I have a happy hermit crab, which is actually adorable. The happy hermit crab was the first one I got, and then I was like, and ETH was at like 4K when they minted, and so I minted a happy hermit crab and it was like half an ETH. It was like kind of expensive for for at the time what other NFTs went for, and then so it was like $2,000, and then I was like, I might be an idiot for minting this shit, I was like, but I'm getting one more, and then I got my sufficient shrimp.
The whole kind of explaining it to your whole Web 2 side of your friends and family becomes complicated, because you've got this thing and you're showing them, you say, okay, look, don't focus on the art. Let me tell you a story about this product. And they're like, well, hang on, what is it that you own beyond the art? And that's where this whole conversation comes from, because it's justifying value. And I think that's why people become so impassioned about it as well, because, they spent 30, 40, more than the average salary of someone in the US or the UK on a JPEG. And then they've got to justify it to not just friends and family, but also to themselves.
Totally. I was I've told this story I think before, but I was I was at a friend's brunch, like birthday brunch, when VFriends was minting, and so I was like, I can't miss either of these things. So I brought my backpack, and this was like, I love this girl. She's one of my like best friends. But like, I lovingly would say like a basic bitch brunch. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, it is sundresses and it is like mimosas and like, yes, girl, like take a picture, whatever. And I'm like there with my backpack, being like, sorry guys, we gotta like mint this happy hermit crab. They're like, what are you doing? You are so weird. Like darken in the corner, being like, I brought my laptop to brunch. They were like, oh my god.
Love that.
But hey,
great decision.
Who's laughing now?
We had this same conversation with a guy called Robbie Knox, who's a UK megastar. This is back like September, October time we first started the podcast, and he has a Reliant rat. And it was a similar story. He went skiing with his friends. He's known these friends for years. They go to the chalet in Switzerland, something like that. And hold on, I need to quickly stop. I need to stop skiing. I need to go out, quickly do this. What are you doing? I'm just minting a Reliant rat. It's just a level to, and then obviously 6 months down the line, well, now it's worth 40k. So
100%.
It just is a weird
it's
world.
Weird, yeah. I think it hit like 70k. I think that they were like 18 was the floor of VFriends at one point. I for sure texted my friend. I was like, just so you know, when we were at brunch and you were making fun of me, suck that. I mean, of course, I didn't sell, so it's gone way down, but still I'm not worried about the VFriends.
All these people that always come out of the closet when the market's down and there's loads of news reports and like, oh yeah, how are those NFTs going?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not going well at the moment. Why did you never ask when it's
when it's going well? I know. Well, also like, the thing was that was so silly about that was like there was, and not that the press wasn't focused on the market, but they were like, oh, and like our NFT's dead, crypto's down, all this. I'm like, equities are down worse. Like Netflix is down worse. Nobody's being like, is Netflix a scam? Like, is Netflix dead? Like, the fuck? Like, stop singling us out.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. And I think getting into crypto, because it was the same thing with crypto. Every time the crypto comes down in value, the press just goes crazy. Oh, massive crypto crash. Everyone's lost millions. It's like, okay, it's gone up like 1,000% and it's come down 10%, Like
100%. We're already up.
Zoom out a little bit.
ETH's up 100% from the bottom. Yeah.
Yes,
I mean, I think it's down a little bit. But yeah, it was like it hit 1,900 and it had been hit like 800. So yeah, we're up.
Merge. Gotta love the merge, but we probably don't have time to get into the merge.
I know. I talk too much. I'm sorry. I'm sure that we could have if I didn't give such long-winded answers.
That's what the podcast is for.
Yeah,
it is, and I think this was one of my points I almost mentioned a moment ago, is that one of the best things about doing this podcast for me is that I've got people that I can talk to about Web3 that I'll be like, oh god, he's talking about those bloody JPEGs again. Yeah. Have you found that with the podcast?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest relief is like my fiance and parents are like, oh, thank God, they're happier about it than anybody. They're like, good, give her the weirdos, her fellow weirdos to talk to.
Please soundproof the room.
yeah, exactly.
Nice. Okay, so what is going to end this bear market, Carly? What is the golden bullet that is going to... Is golden bullet silver bullet?
Silver bullet.
Silver bullet, there we go.
I think it will have to do... I mean, it'll, whatever. It'll be a confluence of things, I'm sure, like stacked on top. But like things like this DraftKings thing, to me are like one cog in that, or one step in that, right? I think that'll, when people are like, oh, it's actually just like cooler to be able to kind of have it as this NFT when I'm, you know, sports betting and putting together my fantasy team. I think, I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this answer. Like multi-medium content. I keep talking about this as something that I'm really excited about. I interviewed Yang Adija, who is the SVP of innovation and et cetera for Turner Sports. And Turner's taking this really seriously. And they own actual like linear TV stations. So they're going to start being able to, and he didn't say this in so many words, but like, you know, integrate NFTs like into commercial breaks, for example, or like things like that, where it's sort of like it's translating more like onto the browser, off the browser, onto the TV. Like that, to me, there's gonna be some cool moments there. Ticketing, but I'll start with just like a couple of choice integrations of NFTs into products that people are using, like a DraftKings, that help to just like break the stigma down for another little wave of people who aren't into it for the tech. They're not into it because they're super nerds. They just like sports gambling, and so they do it. I don't know. Sports betting. Fuck it. I'll go really specific and say it'll be sports betting that'll do it. But you get the broader picture I'm painting.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is that next mass onboarding event, isn't it? And I think it's really the real beginning of the next bull market. It's got to be when we start seeing some more seamless integration of NFTs. People don't necessarily need to know it's an NFT, and it just works, and it utilizes the technology. But you know, there's a million facets and a million use cases for NFTs. So it's going to be interesting to see. It's going to happen as well over the next year, 18 months. There's going to be that big onboarding and that huge drive forwards. And then we can start saying that even though we haven't been in NFT really that long in the whole scale of things, we can be like, yeah, we're ready.
No, I was early. I was telling you guys. Yeah. Well, I mean, hey, look, if you have to like when you survive like being made fun of a bunch for something, or like you know a bunch of people like telling you you're an idiot for something, like that counts as being early. You know, you've earned some stripes. You've borne some BS. So I think we can wear the label.
That's it.
Cool.
So we like to keep these episodes at about 45 minutes length, but we do have 5 questions that we often ask people that come onto the podcast. Okay. Kind of like our trademark
rapid
questions.
Fire.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. So the first one would be, in NFTs, what has been your worst ever trade? You would say something that maybe you've bought and sold, or a bad buy.
Oh gosh, the one that's coming to mind, I've definitely probably lost more money than I did on this. Oh, I bought Cool Pets at like probably like 1.2, and I have not looked at what they are recently, but I think like Cool Cats are at like 1.2. So yeah. I'm sure Cool Pets aren't. Oh, yeah, yeah, thanks, man. I also like I instead of buying a mutant ape, I bought 2 creatures, and like I love Creature World. I love Danny Cole, so I never want to like I don't regret having the creatures, but you know, would love to have a mutant. I could have bought a mutant and then one creature, like that would have been the move. And instead I bought 2 creatures and didn't buy a mutant.
Even just with the ape coin, you would have got.
Don't do it. Don't do it. I don't think about it. I sold. I had some Boss Beauties early, and I ended up riding some of those to they hit like 3 ETH at one point, but I sold a couple of them at like 0.2, and then you're seeing it at 3 ETH. You're like, come on. I like minted at like 0.08 and then sold a couple for like 0.2, 0.3, and then wrote a couple up. But those are some, the ones that you like lay in bed at night being like, like my stomach.
I think I sold my alien friend literally the day Gary Vee bought it. I think I was like the last sale before Gary Vee bought.
What was so painful about the Boss Beauties thing. Actually, that's a good point. I think I sold one of them like literally the day before it went up by like an ETH, and you're like, come on. Like I held this thing for like, months.
I sold all 5 of mine for like, I think I sold 5 for like 0.2, 0.25. But my NFT worlds will never ever be topped.
Yeah. NFT world.
Free. I paid free minted 10 and sold them all for less than 0.5 ETH. I just couldn't work out why anyone wanted Minecraft, but for like, it just didn't make any sense to me. My cousin told me to get them. I was like, cool, they're free mint, fine. But gas was quite expensive at the time. It was October, and then we just watched them all go up to 20 ETH, and it was great.
Oh, that is a stomach ache.
The market of infinite regret, and we all know
it's all
totally
good.
Infinite regret.
Okay, let's flip it a little bit positive and go for, how about your best ever trade?
Probably VeeFriends. I mean, are you talking about that I actually had to sell out of it? Like I actually had to make money, or like
Best Buy? I guess
it ran up. Yeah. So I minted VeeFriends and then watched them run up to 18 ETH or so.
Nice.
Is probably best. Again,
Cool.
I didn't get into any of like the doodles or like the really cool ones. So
Yeah, me neither, unfortunately.
I was like eyeing doodles shortly after mint because I was like aware of it when it minted, but it was like an ETH already, and I'm like really, I don't like spending. I can't like bring myself to spend like more than an ETH on something. I think like an ETH 1.5 is probably the most I've ever spent on something. So yeah,
That must be nice.
I know that.
That'd be nice. Yep.
How about your rarest reveals? So something that you've minted that revealed itself as rare if you mint.
like nothing. I have literally landed floor fucking NFTs every reveal I've been a part of. I have the worst luck. I'm like, how is this possible? I was hoping, I mean, and by the way, I love my World of Women Galaxies, but that, I was like really hoping. I was like in a group chat with somebody who got like, like the 20th rarest or something. You know what I mean? It was like in the top 20.
Multiple times, don't they? The
like,
same person is always
the same motherfuckers. I'm like, what?
And they
what karmic, deal with the devil.
Win all the raffles, get all the mints, all the rare reveals.
I'll think, and I'll message you guys if I come up with one.
Yeah.
But I literally cannot ever remember having that moment of like, oh, I'm excited. Right. Even with like VeeFriends cards, like I have the physical playing. Oh, you know what? No. So here was luck. It was again in VeeFriends ecosystem. It wasn't like a sick reveal, but what I did get was when he did book games, it was like not everybody who bought book games was gonna get them, right? So you got like based on how many book game tokens you had, you would get mint passes for VF2. That's what it was. And I had like 5 book games left that I hadn't sold, and all 5 of them hit for minting VF2.
Oh, nice.
That was crazy. Like, cool. Then I didn't get any cool VF2s, but like still, the fact that I could mint 5 or whatever it was, I was like, wow.
So does this mean you've got like a room full of Gary V books?
Oh, yeah. Oh, well, no. Well, that's a longer story. I did. We, have since dispersed of them, but I do have like these playing cards now, because if you get the VF2, you also got, or book game, whatever it was. I just have cards everywhere, but I haven't opened all the packs. But even there, I'm like opening pack after pack of cards, and it's all just yellow or whatever, like the like lowest, not rare at all card pack is. And I was like, my fiance was opening them. He's like, this is bullshit. He's like, how do you have this where you threw so many packs of cards and you have nothing that's interesting? Like, what is wrong? I'm like,
I wonder how many US people's household of what percentage of their household is full of stuff from Gary V.
I know. When they came, and I guess they look nice, but they're in these like plastic boxes. It's like the packs of cards came in these plastic boxes. I'm like, he's like, what are we? He's like, we just got rid of the books. Like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, we had stacks of books in our apartment for months.
I bet, No, we've got to keep them. We've got to keep them.
Did you buy the Uno cards?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's the. I think that's what they are.
I never got mine. I bought like 50 of those, and they just never arrived.
Yeah, they should come.
I hope so.
Eventually.
I hope so.
Check the Discord.
Well, Gary's a long time listener. So Gary, if you're listening,
I sense you're not in the US.
No,
UK.
No.
So maybe that's why it's
across the pond.
Mighty Great Britain.
That ocean is, slowing up the Uno cards.
Yeah, it's coming on with little hermit crabs. If you could nominate one project and send it to a 100 ETH floor, which project would it be?
But you can't own it.
Oh, I can't own it?
Mm-mm. Well, you don't own it right now, so it's not something you
I have to, it's like, who do I want to reward?
I guess,
what project would you like to see really successful, basically?
I was gonna say, like, I like some of the artists. I would love to see some some artists really get rewarded. And I'm a Danny Cole fan. The other one, the first thought pop I had was Doodles, which is just really unoriginal. But I just feel like I'm talking about them today because I don't know. I guess because I talked about how I liked them. Whatever. That's my answer.
You could have said Zen Academy. I mean,
that's true. I'll say Zen. I'll say or Nemus. I'll say. Okay, Zen Academy. Sure.
Yeah, cool. All right. Well, you could have saved him for this one. If you could do the opposite, if you could get rid of one project.
Tank a project?
No, delete it.
Just delete it. Delete it from existence. Nobody loses any money, but you kind of I don't know. Maybe it was like one of those. It just never happened.
Yeah. Oh God, I feel like that. I mean, I mean, I would. The first thing that pops in my head is Pixelmon, but I'm like, no, I would. I never would want to get rid of Kevin. Like that was just like gold. I mean, I feel bad for people who lost money in that. Yeah. Definitely I'd have to think of a scam project that like I'm like, you know, I really do feel bad for people when they. The financial stress of because there's such a gambling element of this, like, you know, yes, okay, people need to take personal responsibility and don't play with money that you can't afford to lose, but like I totally get it. You know, you're in these discords and it's people are hyping you up and you think it's gonna moon and that adrenaline starts going and it feels, you know, it has the same, like, you know, whatever serotonin like receptor, some bullshit that's happening chemically in your brain, and you throw a bunch of money at something and like, oh, that hurts me. So some sort of scam project, maybe one of like the past Zagabond projects. What were those? Some of like the Nuggets one, or like
chicken.
I don't know.
Yeah,
maybe like maybe delete the Azuki teams all their previous projects.
Oh yeah,
and therefore there's no controversy.
I know. I have whatever. We don't have time in this podcast to go to it, but I have such mixed feelings on the Zagabond Azuki thing because I think Azuki's branding is. I think it's actually a very talented team. It's a shame that he has kind of like had such bad will. Yeah. Invisible Friends. So I would maybe pump Invisible Friends. That's one I don't own that I love. Ooh. I love their partnership with Kith. Yeah. There's something about the whole random cartoon collective that I'm like kind of. I
like an animated collection. As an animator, I'm a fan of an animated collection. Yeah.
And Invisible Friends just does it like it's just cool. Like I love the concept. I don't know. There's just something about it. I'm like, yeah, I get it. That's freaking cool. There's some other like well-branded projects that I like, but anyway.
Awesome. Carly, it has been amazing having you on. So much fun to talk about the market. It's funny because I listen to your podcast and it's been amazing being able to actually talk back.
Yeah.
You're just running, chatting, aren't you, Jim?
Yeah, not running.
Yeah, I'm not running. I'm a lot more comfortable sat down here.
We didn't say it in this version of the podcast, but Jimmy apparently runs to Overpriced JPEGs, so we were wondering if like just the sound of my voice was going to get his like, you know, adrenaline pumping, you know, like he was conditioned for a run. Yeah. Well, thank you all so much for having me. Yeah, exactly. I know.
You're more than welcome anytime. We'd love to have you back on at some point.
Would love to. I'm going to have you on Overpriced JPEGs, so we'll coordinate that. Amazing. Would love to have y'all on.
Really, really cool. And so if anyone wants to check Carly out, we're going to put all the links to you and all of your content in the description below. You've just launched your new newsletter, which I was reading today, which is very good.
Oh, I like it.
And you managed to get a few Taylor Swift references in there.
I did. I know that'll be the thing. I'll see how many I can get in.
It's your calling card. I think you have to try and get Taylor Swift into like every an NFT project Crowbar's utility. You've got to crowbar in Taylor Swift analogies into every article.
Okay. What's the best Taylor Swift song?
Article. All Too Well. I mean, I'm not. Again, I'm mainstream. All Too Well. Shake It Off. Dear John. Cruel Summer would be you guys don't really want to hear. I could go on.
That's like 4.
Sleeper pick. All Too Well. All Too Well is the best. Oh yeah, I could keep going for sure. Long Live. That's a sleeper pick that I think people forget about, but like gorgeous. Pick. Bring tears to your eyes. Gold Rush.
When Swiftie NFTs.
Man, I don't know. I think she'll be. She won't. She's not like the early adopter to this kind of thing type. You know, she stays in her lane and does it brilliantly.
You don't really need to.
With a sterling brand like the Swift.
Exactly.
We've got the Sterling Swift name. Why mess with it?
So definitely check out Carly's newsletter. Definitely check out the podcast as well. Overpriced JPEG as part of the Bankless family of content. And it's been great. So thanks very much for coming on.
Such a blast. Thank you all so much for having me. I really appreciate it.